Relax.
Right, we are back in Senate Judiciary to hear the budget request from the Judiciary. And
We were both going to speak if that's okay.
yeah, that works.
Okay. Morning, I'm Perry West, I'm the State Court Administrator with Greg Musley, who's the Chief of Finance and Administration at the Judiciary. And we provided two sets of materials. One is slides that we'll just be referring to hard copies there if you would like. And the other is a memo. It lays out what our budget request is based on looking at the fiscal year 25 budget and increases for this year. We thought that might be the best way to kind of explain it to us. And then the total request, which for the most part is part of the governor's recommend. The Budget Adjustment Act portions of the budget were also part of the governor's recommend, but that now is somewhat in limbo, the Budget Adjustment Act. So we've included those figures in our budget request because we're not certain what will happen with those amounts. If the Budget Adjustment Act does end up getting passed, that would be reducing our request by the amount that's in the Budget Adjustment Act, but just given the circumstances, that's how it's being presented otherwise. And the two major components of what we're requesting for the increase has to do with IT expenses. And you all may or may not remember that in the Judiciary, there was a tech fund established years ago that did cover tech expenses for a number of years. It came from receipts from traffic fines, in essence, and its apex was up to 1.5 million, which did cover tech expenses before we had kind of the explosion of tech needs with electronic filing, electronic case management, remote hearing, cybersecurity issues, etc., which have evolved over the years. So we have before the appropriations committees for the past several years indicated that we're coming to a cliff where the tech fund is just not going to be able to sustain the tech expenses. As the tech fund revenues have decreased, tech expenses have increased. To the extent that the tech fund now, the total revenue eligible to the tech needs and the Judiciary is $750,000, which just doesn't cover the tech expenses. So our big request for the budget this year is that tech expenses be covered from the general fund versus just from the tech fund. So that's kind of the big focal point of our request. The other part of the request, the increase, has to do with cost of living adjustment for the sheriffs. That's kind of a pass-through, but we historically have the sheriff's monies come through our budget, and then it's built into the contracts that we have with sheriffs for courthouse security. And Greg will go into more detail, but that's kind of the broad overview of what the Judiciary budget request is for fiscal year 26. And again, we have a little bit of the adjustment here depending upon the Budget Adjustment Act. Last year, we knew, for example, that the tech fund was not going to cover the tech expenses. It was recommended to us to just put it into the Budget Adjustment Act for this year, so that's what we did. But just with what's happening with Budget Adjustment Act, that figure is kind of unknown whether it will be paid out of the Budget Adjustment Act or whether we'll have to incorporate into our fiscal year 26 request. But the figures that you have includes everything. The 72,994,32 is everything, including what may come out of the Budget Adjustment Act, but we just don't know.
Just to clarify, your primary ask is the tech fund revenue replacement. Is that
Yes.
what I'm under? And that's the 3.5 million that I'm looking at on page 2 of the slides.
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yeah, although it should be noted that that 3.5 million is really a multi-year problem. It's been growing for many years. We're talking about the decline in civil violation revenue since pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic. So kept saying it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem, but not this year. 2025 was the year that it became a problem. Our IT expenses from this year to next year are only going to go up about 500,000. And so 3.5 makes it look much worse than it is.
Because we're making out.
We're making out for the private. Yeah, the primary problem with civil violations is don't need to pay the underlying fee to get your license back. That was one of the motivators for collections. People would call up and say, I need a valid driver's license. I need to pay my driver's license. That doesn't happen anymore. So the revenue has gone down, and all the special funds that are a piece of that civil violations have experienced the same type of problem.
Committee, any questions so far?
So just go through the numbers.
Sure.
So overall, you see that our existing budget is. Yeah, I'm actually just looking at the graph on slide 4. I thought I'd start with an overview. That shows what we spend our money on. And you can see that 71% of our budget is salaries and benefits. We are a very labor intensive workforce. The remaining pieces are either rent that we pay to the state or the courthouses. The security contracts that we pay mostly to sheriffs, but it also includes one private security firm. And then our IT budget is about 4%, 4.7% of our entire budget, about $3.5 million. And then everything else in our budget adds up to 8%. And that's all the programs, the interpreters, the guardian ad litem's, all the, of course, office supplies, postage, printers, everything like that. Just 8%. So that's how we spend our money. And the next slide 5, shows where we get our money from, and it clearly shows 92% of our funding is general fund. We have very little other resources for funding, but those other resources are an interdepartmental transfer is 3%. Most of that is Title 4D, which is child support cases that GCR operates. And we do have some federal grants. Most of those go to treatment courts around the state in different locations. And court technology fund is also part of that. That's the civil violations that I just mentioned. So, and we also have an attorney admission licensing fund. We operate the attorney licensing and the bar exam. So that there's some fees that go in supporting those operations. But mostly it's general fund, 91%.
So just so I'm understanding, is basically the ask to stay within the governor's recommend, but you're also asking on top of that for the $3.5 million from tech for IT expenses to go from the tech fund to the general fund.
The $3.5 million is part of the governor's recommend.
Oh,
It is. Everything was in the governor's recommending. The only piece that wasn't mentioned before we went live about the bathroom in Essex and $800,000 for rewiring some courthouses. What we were proposing was to take money left over from another project, an HVAC project, and say, can we just, instead of putting HVAC to county buildings, we rewire the county buildings. And the governor recommended the reversion be taken back, but not the expense. So that's the only piece of and it's in the BAA. It's the only piece that wasn't part of the governor's recommend. It's $850,000. All the IT expenses, all 3.4, is either in the BAA recommend or the budget recommend. Okay.
So you're not asking for any new positions, or?
No,
Oh, shit. Yeah, Senator.
I do. I guess I'm trying to understand because given, I mean, the HVAC and clean air is important. So I'm trying to understand why there's a decision not to do that and to rewire.
It was leftover HVAC money. We had found in 2021 said, hey, air is important. We have a number of county buildings that don't have ventilation. And we received a one-time appropriation, general fund dollars, for like $5.7 million to upgrade the HVAC. We're getting to the end of that. There's still some small pieces left to do. And we're going to have some leftover money. And said, can we still invest in the county buildings, but do it with rewiring? Because the computer network has 1990 cabling that's called Category 3 wires. The Cat 6 is the new version. It's like to replace that. And so we thought we would just take the money that was already appropriated and say, it won't cost you anything, just let us do this.
Okay. thanks. I misunderstood.
So
I thought you were
We were
saying that you're not gonna do HVAC, you're gonna do electricity. I was like, oh,
We should have said it was all
We have-
edited, this was left over.
We have 23 courthouses and they all have ventilation that meets ASHRAE standards for pandemic. So we are able to get fresh, clean air to all of our buildings.
amazing. You were just somehow able to do it under budget. I love that. I think you should be rewarded with upgraded electrical systems. Makes sense to me.
So,
Yeah, I do have one question. I should have asked this earlier, Chair, Greg, because I was just curious, this one large county who doesn't have law enforcement security, the comparison in cost between an individual from the security firm versus an individual from law enforcement. If you don't have that now, as long as you could get that from me, that'd be great.
The exact numbers I'd have to give for you, but I can tell you that the law enforcement is currently at $53 an hour. And the private security is about 40-ish an hour, 38 to 40-ish. Something like that.
Is that armed security?
They're armed, they're not law enforcement.
Huh. And I'll get into that later, I guess. I was just curious, that's why I would look furthering that at the cost.
Is that because of benefits? Because they get benefits from their company versus?
That's the cost that we contract with both the private security and the sheriffs, and so sheriffs just have a higher cost, probably because of training in law enforcement.
And then have powers of arrest or security.
Yeah, which is essentially,
Okay.
you know, the private security guards are trained in de-escalation. They're trained in firearms and general security practices. They cannot arrest people. And so, and they have no jurisdiction outside of courthouse. So if something spills out into a parking lot or off courthouse grounds,
Courthouse property right now, like outside courthouse.
yeah,
Courthouse.
off courthouse property, which sometimes is a sidewalk away from the front door, they will stop and just observe and call. So there are some limitations to private security. We only do that as a last resort when you can't find law enforcement or our own employees.
So one quick follow-up on that. I realize this large county has like 6 or 7 deputies downstairs in the holding cell, that for the most part, but how is it that the court staff, and in fact, the court takes someone into custody? Who does that?
Are you saying, for example, at Costello, where you have?
Right.
court
They take some
officers?
judges that take them into custody.
Rob Shaw would be the best person to answer that, but they have a system worked out.
Yeah, there's a system that works out. If there's a detainee that's been brought to court, then there's transport sheriff deputies that accompany that person. If it's somebody who, for instance, has been adjudicated as guilty and taken into custody, we will escort them, our employees will escort them to the holding cell.
Okay.
And then they wait there for sheriffs to arrive.
I didn't mean to get off the budget here. I'm sorry.
Senator,
I actually, well, I'm glad you did, because it brought up a question that I remember that I had, and that is about the transport deputies and why there isn't an ask for an increase. Because my understanding is there's some challenges getting people to and from court in a timely manner.
The transport deputies are actually through the sheriffs and deputies.
So you wouldn't ask for them.
But I think they are.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Yeah.
It's a good reason, not our.
you're hearing from them at 11.
All right, that's a really good reason that you're not asking for them.
Check.
Support.
Yes. Okay.
Maybe any further questions?
I mean, I guess I'll ask you the question. I know it's a small percentage of your budget that I'm sort of asking everyone, but I'm looking down through your federal funding, and it is, do those grants feel secure, or is there concern about any of them not being available?
Yeah, we're doing our best to get clarification like everybody else, but we haven't learned anything or been given any reason to assume that they would be at risk. The bulk of them are for the treatment courts, which we don't feel like that's been a target of, cuts elsewhere. And then otherwise it's the stop violence grant, which same thing, domestic violence. I don't
Yeah.
include anything that we educate as
Okay.
such. But we are actually speaking with, House Appropriations tomorrow on that same exact issue.
Okay.
We have the spreadsheet to kind of list all the factors, et cetera. So Probably getting more detail. We haven't been notified of anything to say that, this is at risk. And from what I understand, some people have gotten notification that you're being cut or you're being reduced, but nothing is just.
Okay. Okay.
And on the slide that has federal funding, the second section is what it's labeled as indirect federal funding. This is money that comes to another part of the state government, usually it's AHS. And we are sub-recipient, so it comes to us during each of the departmental transfer,
Mhm.
but it's federal funds.
Okay.
And the total of our funding from federal funds is $3,900,634. And it's basically 2% of our overall budget.
Okay. That's helpful. So I know it wasn't a big amount, but lots of questions.
Logical question.
Any further testimony or closing remarks?
We very much appreciate obviously your support. And did you mention that I guess the idea is to send a letter of support to the operations? Is that?
Yeah, we'll be drafting up a letter of support, still trying to figure out how we're going to itemize and prioritize the different asks. Just because I know in past sessions, committees have received a sort of set of parameters for how much money can be spent. We don't have that this session, so it'll be a little tricky, but we'll figure it out one way or the other.
So if there's anything that we can provide, if you need additional detail or data or anything, please let us know. We're happy to. We were hoping that this would just at least give you the numbers and the rationale behind, but we're hoping that it's fairly straightforward. And we were very pleased because it doesn't always happen. That's everything's included in the governor's recommendation. So
Okay. Great, thank you.
thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for good.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Make a phone call. Maybe Matt will show up if you'd like to.